And we are live. Welcome everyone to a mighty Blaze Boudoir. I am Mary O'Malley, and along with Kate LeBeau, tonight we are thrilled to welcome as our guest Emily McIntire. Emily is an international and Amazon top 15 best-selling author known for her Never After series, where she gives our favorite villains their happily ever afters. With books that range from small town to dark romance, she doesn't like to box herself in with one type of story, but at the core of all her novels is soul deep love. When she's not writing, you can find Emily waiting on her long lost Hogwarts letter, enjoying her family, and lost between the pages of a good book. So, Kate and Emily are going to spend a little time talking about Emily's books and all things romance. I'm going to leave while they do that. And then I will pop back in to take your questions and bring them to Emily. So as you listen along, if you have any questions, please do put them into the chat box. And off I go. You guys have a great conversation. See you soon.
Okay. So my first question that I am dying to know the answer to is, who was your first villainous crush?
That's actually a really good question.
I mean, it started somewhere because you built an entire career around it now.
Right. Yeah. No, I've actually always kind of rooted for the villain, even when I was young. I'm going to say my first villain crush was probably Scar from The Lion King. That was my
You're
favorite.
not alone.
Yeah, that was my favorite Disney movie, and I just really always felt like he was misunderstood.
That's so. My husband keeps trying to have our son listen to the music from that, and he tried to put it on the other day, and I was like, I will have to leave the room if you put on The Lion King. I cannot. It is so stressful for me. I have like PTSD from watching it as a child. But I made a post about Disney villains the other day, and someone was like, I know Scar's a lion, but does he count? I was like, we can pretend he's a shifter. It's totally fine. So I love that when I Google you, because instead of going to Goodreads and looking up books, I Googled the book title. It just pops up as Book Talk Sensation, right on the right side of Google. That's like the first thing people learn about you. First two words, Book Talk Sensation. How does that feel? How did it feel to blow up on Book Talk? And did you see it coming? Was it like an overnight thing? I'm very curious how this Book Talk Sensation thing works.
I didn't know it said that. So wow. It's actually funny because I really put off getting on TikTok for a long time. I really didn't. I was like, no, I don't want to get on there. It's just another social media and I'll get sucked in. And then something kept telling me in the back of my head, you need to get on there. You need to get on there. And I had already started my first series, the Sugar Lake series, which is not dark romance. And it was pretty successful, especially for it being my debut novel. But when I got on TikTok, it was just the second I got on there, it clicked for me. It was my platform. It is my platform because I can be myself, like my quirky, goofy, weird self, and not worry about having to do pretty pictures or anything like that.
Yeah, I can't. I don't have that talent of putting together beautiful pictures. I can be funny and that's it.
Yeah, that's me. Like, this is me. I'm probably going to look like I just rolled out of bed most of the time, but take it or leave it. So it kind of, I actually, when I first got on TikTok, it was with my first series. I hadn't written Hooked yet, which is the first book in my Never After series and the one that took off on Book Talk. And my first book I ever wrote, Beneath the Stars, actually went viral on a TikTok of mine and hit like 18 in the Amazon store.
Wow.
In the Kindle store. And that was like crazy for me because I've only been a published author for 2 years at this point.
Oh my God. You have 20 books.
Yeah, I know. So then I was like brand new. And that changed the entire trajectory of my career. But that was still a slower build. And then when Hooked came out, I really didn't do much on TikTok for that. that was like, it just kind of was word of mouth. It actually didn't hit the top 100 on the Kindle store in its first week. And then once word of mouth took off on TikTok and then spread to the other areas, it just soared into the top 100, and it's been there for a year, for over a year now.
Wow. That just feel really good to know that something you poured your heart and soul into, I don't know, that people appreciate it and that they get it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a wild feeling to have people just like reading my words, and they either hate it or they love it, but either way they're feeling something about it.
Yeah, honestly, I know it isn't always the case that bad press is good press, but when it comes to romance novels, it almost always is. Like, somebody could hate it and post about it, and you're going to get probably 50% of the people who do that are going to go out and buy your book, specifically because the person they hated it.
Totally.
Which is something that I feel like doesn't translate so much into like other review areas. If I review something poorly on Amazon, like a product, most people aren't going to be like, oh yeah, this terrible review makes me want to go out and get it. Right. But when it comes to romance, especially a review that's like too much sex, people are like, check. I would like to take that home with me immediately.
Yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit about your Never After series then? I mean, I could talk about it, but why don't we hear it from your words first before I gush about it?
Yeah, my Never After series is a collection of complete standalone books. Each book is in its own universe, and it is basically fractured fairy tales, reimaginings, where I take classic fairy tales, I break them apart, I twist them up, I rip them out of their fantasy world and put them into normally modern day settings, and then give their villain their happily ever after. And that's what all of them are about. So Hooked is based obviously off Hook from Peter Pan, but it is a contemporary romance, not fantasy. It's modern day, kind of like mafia vibes, but it's just an organized crime ring. Then Scarred is inspired loosely by Scar, but really I pulled heavily from Hamlet for this one. And this is a royal romance set in the Edwardian era in 1910. And then Wretched is the third book that released, and this is a reimagining of The Wizard of Oz. And the Wicked Witch of the West is the inspiration for the villain in this.
Wow. And so coming up, though, you have Twisted.
Yes.
Which is an Aladdin retelling.
Yep. Yeah. An Aladdin one.
I hate the word retelling. And Emily does not do retelling. She does reimagining. If you want to be very clear, do not pick these books up thinking that you are going to get a retelling of a classic fairy tale or whatever. It is not. Like she said, they're fractured, broken apart, put back together, twisted. So it is a retelling of Aladdin, and it's out in February.
Yep. February 7th. Yeah, and this one just finished going through edits. I just got the copy edits, and I am so excited. Aladdin was one of my favorite stories, and I pull really heavily from the original source work, which the original source work of Aladdin is interesting. It actually took place in China, which I didn't know until I picked it up to start researching.
Is there a tiger featured somewhere in there?
There's not a tiger featured anywhere in there.
I don't remember much about Aladdin. Like classic Disney movies traumatized me as a child. So I love reimaginings and retellings, because when you read them I know they end happy in Disney movies too, but for some reason when I read it, I just have like a more comfortable feeling.
Right.
But so Twisted is your first book that's being first published traditionally. The previous ones were originally published indie, correct?
Yep, that's correct. Yeah, this one will be published by Bloom Books.
How does the process differ? I mean, obviously Hooked and Scarred and Wretched have all been published now by Bloom as well. Mm-hmm. But how's the process different when you're starting from a place of traditional publishing versus starting as an indie publisher? Are there any I don't know, more eyes on it than previously?
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. Yeah, it's actually quite a different process, and it's taken me, it's quite a shift for me. I work really, really well on really intense deadlines, which is why I've been able to publish the amount of books I have in the time, because I write fast because I need that pressure. So with traditional publishing, there's a longer period of time between. So it was kind of a shift for me. Normally, I write the book, I go through my own edits, then I send it to beta readers, then I send it to my editor, and then I get it back. And then I publish it and I release it. And this one, it was, having to coordinate. Now I have a PR team, I have a publicist, I have a social media team, I have an editing team and a head editor I talk to. So it was interesting having to kind of not do everything on my own and be like, okay, we're going to do the cover reveal here with BuzzFeed, and then we're going to put it up for pre-order on this date. And then the editing itself, it's actually been incredible for me, but it's also been a shift because it goes into editing, and then I get it back from developmental editing, and then I edit it, and I send it back, and then I get it back again. And I think it's gone through 4 or 5 rounds, which is great, but it's very different from self-publishing.
I can imagine. I feel like it's nice in some ways because you do have all that. You have the accountability, you have all the guidance, and obviously it's cool to have like a PR team and BuzzFeed like doing things for revealing things for you. But did you lose? And obviously, like, is there a sense of like a loss of control, or do you feel like Bloom has really allowed you to kind of be as creative as you want to be with your book and just give you nudges about like where maybe you could make improvements?
I don't feel like I lost control. And actually, before I signed with Bloom, that was a big thing for me. I was fully prepared when they first reached out to me and they sat me down. I went into the meeting like, I'm going to turn them down. Like, it's really flattering, but I can't give up control. But I have creative control over everything. So I can say no to any edits I don't want. I still have my own cover designer. I get the final word. So and my editor is really amazing at not changing my voice. And they just go in and, they find the things that like, well, as a reader, I would have liked to hear more about this, or like, let's reword this phrase. And so it's really just, I feel like they push me to become a better writer, and they allow me to kind of hone my voice, but they're not stifling it or telling me I have to write a certain way, which is incredible because I don't know. I don't know for sure, but from what I hear, sometimes that's not the case in all traditional publishing.
Yeah, that's why I was curious, because I know that some authors have said how they've had to give up some control of their covers and of their their maybe a direction they wanted to go. I know that Olivia Dade, for example, had to put a pegging scene in a bonus episode, or like a bonus in her newsletter, because they didn't want to publish that in a traditionally published book. That is what I've heard, which is interesting, because your books are, they kind of push the limits of what has previously, obviously 50 Shades of Grey exists, but it does push the limits of maybe what you might find on the bookshelf at Barnes and Noble and things like that. Sorry, there are dogs outside. So I was curious, how did it go about going from being indie published to blowing up to then getting this offer from Bloom Books? I know there are a lot of people who might be listening who are interested in, you've kind of hit the dream for a lot of people who indie publish because they want to break into traditional publishing, and that's getting easier and easier. But obviously it sounds like that's not really something that was your goal. You planned to turn them down when you went into that meeting. But was it still kind of like a nice boost to the author ego that, you were being approached now by a publisher and not the other way around?
Yeah. Oh, a huge boost. Look, I deal with imposter syndrome just like everybody else. And I don't think that ever goes away for the majority of people. So when things like that happen, one, it's like kind of shocking. You're like, oh, really? Me? But it was really nice. And traditional publishing is always a dream, because you just, it's a milestone in an author's career because of the network distribution and getting kind of the face time and the shelving everywhere that you can't get when you're indie published. But yeah, I was ready to turn them down because I didn't want to give up control. But Bloom Books, which is an imprint of Source Books, are incredible because they're really, the way they're working with the authors that they're signing is they're working with the authors. They're coming for authors who have hit success on their own and who run their own business well. And then they're working out deals. Like I still own all of my ebook rights. So
Wow.
they don't have any of that. So they're just the print rights, and I still get everything on my end for the ebook rights, so I can keep it in Kindle Unlimited if I want. And that
I was wondering because I did read it on Kindle Unlimited and I was confused. Like I thought it maybe couldn't do both, but that makes sense then that they worked with you on that.
Right. And so that was a big moment for me, having a traditional publisher willing to negotiate with me on what I wanted to give up and what I wanted from them and what they wanted from me. And having that power from the success that I was able to foster independently, that was the biggest, like, oh, okay, I'm doing something right, I guess.
And what has been the best thing that has happened to you? Kind of, I mean, it could even be before you blew up on Book Talk and everything, but what has been the most exciting thing that has happened to you since becoming an author a mere 2 years ago, published author? Has any, you've been to signings and things like that? Was it the first time you were recognized on the street, or?
I actually haven't been to signings yet. The first signing I'll be at is October 6th in St. Charles, Missouri. And that will be like the first time I ever do anything. But I do have some coming up. So I think really, honestly, the most exciting thing outside of just realizing how many people were reading my works and like enjoying them is when I hit the level that my husband, who's an engineer, could quit his job and live at home, or live at home. He gets to live inside the house now. I don't keep him outside. No, he stays home all day and is a stay-at-home dad with our 3.5-year-old daughter, and is able to work with me on the back end of the business. And for me, that's always something I've wanted, and I know it's something that is really important now to him and my daughter. And so that's probably that was my moment. Like, okay, my books are generating enough to comfortably take care of everything, and we can have this.
That's awesome. I like that your most exciting thing was like being able to do something for your family. Like that. My most exciting thing was when I screamed at Tessa Bailey in a Starbucks and she knew who I was. Like I'm like that was not one time actually. I was walking down the street in my hometown and I got a DM on Instagram, and I'm not an author. I'm not like famous. And some guy DM'd me and said, "Do you live in where I was walking down?" He's like, "I think I just saw you on the street." And I was like, "Oh my God, it was me." Like, people might actually see my face. So that's why I was curious if maybe somebody had, gotten really excited running into you at a Starbucks or something like that.
Not at Starbucks, but when we just recently moved into this new house, we just moved to Tennessee, and I had custom drapes installed in the living room, and the interior designers knew who I was. So they showed up, and that was like the first time. It was such a weird experience because they were like, "Oh my gosh," one of them's like, "My daughter reads all your books. She's gonna lose her mind." And then the other was like, "I've seen your books at Barnes and Noble." And that was like, oh, okay.
That's fun that it ended up just being the people installing your drapery.
I know.
But I get that because like the first thing they're gonna, I wonder if they like saw your name and then were like, "No, it can't be. Like, there's no way." And then you show up and they're like, "Oh my God, it is." Like my daughter has showed me all of your TikToks. But that's kind of the fun part about there are pros and cons to putting your face out there all the time and putting your books out there all the time for people to critique and criticize. And I'm sure you have been tagged in a handful of negative reviews like so many authors have. I have never tagged an author in a negative review before, but I know some people are wanting to do that. So it's nice that there are positives to, the entire process and the fame,
right?
Even with, the negatives a little bit. I am curious, are there any, not necessarily one that you are going to be writing, but is there a fairy tale that you would love to see somebody reimagine? Or even, just, it doesn't have to be a fairy tale, just a story that you would love to see somebody have a new take on it. And again, for anyone watching, this does not commit Emily to doing this, whatever she says.
Yeah. That's a great question. I haven't thought about that before. I don't know if I have an immediate answer because there are a lot that I would love to see done, but a lot that I know can never legally be done.
Well, okay, what's one of those? That's a safe one because nobody can ever do it. There's
Right. Right. But yeah, still, it's so hard though, because I feel like all of them should be redone all the time. Mulan's one that I really
I was literally going to say Mulan.
Yeah, and I will not be tackling Mulan because it is so enriched in actual history that I don't feel like it's I wouldn't do that story justice. I don't feel like it's my place to do it, but I would absolutely love to read a Mulan reimagining. It's like, I just know it would be incredible.
I love like gender bent retellings, but Mulan does not work if you gender bend it because it's just, I mean, unless you gender bend the entire universe and now they're in like a matriarchal like society, but it doesn't really work gender bent. So I don't know. I loved like I want to read like Tangled, but like gender bent. For like
that would be nice.
Held captive by like his parents or something. I think that, and he has like really long hair. I don't know why. It's just like in my head. I don't even know if you like. I've never been interested in men with really long hair, but for some reason I really want like a Tangled retelling with like. I think I just really like the movie Tangled.
I do too. I get it.
I was curious so obviously like you said, you've only been writing for 2 years, or you've been published for 2 years. I'm sure you've been writing for a very long time. What kind of pushed you into taking the leap into publishing your first book, which you said was, what is it, with the stars? Was that the first one?
Beneath the Stars was my very first novel ever. This is a wild story, so I'm really glad you asked. So I've always been a writer my entire life. I had, hundreds of notebooks growing up filled with poems and whatever you can think of. But I've always been a reader, a voracious reader. And I had been thinking about writing a book, but I had never told anybody, not even my husband. And one time my mom got me a psychic reading with her psychic who lives in England. So it was done over Skype, and he goes in totally blind, doesn't know anything about you but your first name. And he says, and he was very on point with literally everything. But then he says, now who is it that's thinking about writing a book? It's either you or somebody close to you. He's like, Spirit is really telling me that really needs to happen. They're really pushing for that to happen. So that like freaked me out. And he kept saying like, there's so much creativity around you, but they're really pushing. I still didn't do anything about it. So about 6 months later, my husband was gifted a reading. And again, he didn't know it was my husband. He didn't know anything about him, went in blind. And in the middle of my husband's reading, he goes, there's somebody really close to you that's gifted with the written word. And I'm really hearing that you need to push them into whatever it is they're thinking about doing. And my husband's like, maybe it's this person or this person who's published books. And they're like, no, he's like, no, they're saying to be published. And they're really saying that that's what this person's meant to do. And you need to push them into doing it. So when my husband told me that, I was like, okay, I guess.
You were like,
I'll write a book. I guess I'll write a book. So I sat down and Beneath the Stars was born.
Oh my God. That is somebody commented, hello, Emily, I've become a brand new fan of yours. I read and listen to Scarred, and I'm completely in love. Prince Tristan is so swoon-worthy and such a bad boy. Can't wait to read Hooked and Wretched. I didn't realize like it's actually kind of fun that they're all standalones in their own right, because people don't have to, they can read the fairy tale that they want to read the reimagining of.
Yeah.
They don't have to read in order, which is kind of fun that way. Because I don't read books in order, even if they are meant to be read in order. I read the trope I want first, and then I work my way backwards.
That's what I do because I'm a mood reader.
Yeah, it's like I can't. If book 3 has like the male virgin, like I'm sorry, but that's where I'm starting.
Yeah,
I'm gonna have to go back and read book 1 later. Which I did that with a Katie Ruggles series, who is a source books author as well, and it was like an underlying like crime throughout all 4, so that it didn't really work. I was missing some key components of the book.
Made it work.
But it was worth it. What was the first romance novel you ever read? And how old were you?
Oh my gosh. I don't even know if I know that. Because I'll be honest, I started reading fan fiction. That was I got started in fan fiction, and I was young.
Well, who were you shipping in fan fiction?
I was Twilight and Harry
Okay.
Potter. Twilight and Harry Potter. Those are my two.
That's
But
where everybody's
look, I love Lord Voldemort and Hermione fan fiction, or like Tom Riddle and Hermione. So, villain, here I am.
You were ready for it.
I
you
was
skipped
born
Draco
for this.
Hermione and went right to.
Well, look, Draco's not the leader, okay?
You were like, no, I need the man in charge.
Right. But I will say that I read 50 Shades of Grey when it was fan fiction, and it was called Masters of the Universe, and it was a Twilight fan fiction. And that is one of the first. So I'll say maybe that was one of the first ones I remember because I was so heavy into fan fiction. And then when it came out years later as a book, I picked it up not knowing, and I read the first book and I was like, I know how this whole series ends.
That is so. I think 50 Shades of Grey or hate it, it did something for the romance community that it propelled the entire genre forward. Absolutely. And in some people's eyes, it set it back like a decade. But I think that whether you like the writing or the story or not, like, you can't ignore that it shot romance into the limelight for a very long time. And it gave people a lot of confidence to start writing their own stuff. They were like, oh, this like book with all this like BDSM side stuff and, trauma and darkness, people loved it. So they were like, I'm going to put my trauma on a page now and see where it takes me. I am, no, she's back.
Speaking of trauma, the cause of so much of yours. Did you have another question? Go ahead and ask it.
No, I just saw that Kristen's comment was just, Emily, how do you feel about A Princess and the Frog retelling?
Oh, wow. I've never actually even thought of that one. Yeah, I think that's a really interesting one. You could do a lot with it. So I'm
thinking like monster romance where he doesn't turn back into a prince. He just stays a frog monster. It's like where and true love was never to turn him back. It's Shrek,
Right.
He stays the frog.
Yeah.
Anyways, that was what I saw right before. Defer to my mother now.
So we have several comments or questions from SReside94, who's been commenting and adding questions all this time. So welcome. We're glad you're here. And their first question is, what's your advice for people who want to get on TikTok but don't know where to start?
That's a really good question. I would say, one, don't go out of your comfort zone, because a lot of people will say you have to show your face or you have to do like the dances or the funny stuff. You don't. Just be yourself. And if you're more comfortable not showing your face, there are plenty of things you can do, specifically if you want to be on Book Talk. It's very popular to do page flips and put quotes over them, or to do kind of just like, you combine different things together, like collages, but it's for TikTok, if that makes sense. So I would say figure out what you're comfortable with. And TikTok is very genuine in the way that they want to see who you are, no matter what that is. They don't want kind of this pre-made, this is my brand in your face. So just be yourself and have fun. And don't worry about doing like this huge production, because it's always my 5-second videos that do the best.
I'm curious, has anyone ever picked a quote of yours and like, used it in something and you're like, I did not know that quote would ever be like picked?
Always. Look, the popular highlights, when I go on the Kindle versions and it shows the most popular highlights, they're never the ones I expected. There's always one scene in each of my books that I know this is going to be the most popular scene. But outside of that, the quotes always shock me what they think.
Sometimes I see people share them and I'm like, I love that you love that quote, but I'm like, that is a strange quote to choose for like a TikTok. But it's so popular and I'm just like, it works. Like people don't all agree on what is hot for them, It's always some like little fetish slips in there, I feel like.
Totally.
All right. So That's Reside also would like to know, how do you choose which villains to write about?
I actually don't choose beforehand because I'm what I call it method writing, similar to method acting, where the characters quite literally drop into my head and scream at me. And I really have no control. And that's why I write first person present tense and I don't pre-plot my books because I really am channeling the character. So I cannot write a character unless they're in my head. And so they just happen to come to me. And it's usually when I'm writing the book, I'm my current work in progress. When I'm at like the climax of writing that story, the next character drops in my head and starts yelling at me and distracting me. And then that's what I go with. So it's not really a conscious decision.
Do you brush up on obviously the book, like before you wrote Scar, you said that it came a lot from Hamlet, but did you also like rewatch Lion King, like read Hamlet, or do you just go with what you remember from it?
I don't watch the Disney movies because if I watch the Disney movies, I'll take stuff from the Disney movies and then the source books legal team will yell at me and make me take it out.
You'll be like, whoa, why is he saying Hakuna Matata?
Right. Like, no, let's not do that. So I do research the original source work. So I did, I know Hamlet. I'm obsessed with Shakespeare. So I didn't have to do it for that. But like Wizard of Oz, I did. I always get the original novels and I go through and I research them and I kind of get their characters and that story in my head. So, and that's what kind of inspires the ideas and my characters start talking to me heavier and show me the scenes for the chapters.
Love this. I'm absolutely fascinated. So our last question from S Reside is, what's your favorite thing about indie publishing and what's your favorite thing about traditional publishing?
These are really good questions. My favorite thing about indie publishing is having 100% complete control over everything and being able to do things on my own timeline and kind of see the grassroots of starting from nothing and then, your success or getting your readers there, all of that. That is a really special feeling for me. And also I'm a control freak. And so that's really nice for me to have all that control. My favorite thing about traditional publishing is definitely the support of the traditional publisher and their deep connections and distribution connections, because there are levels that you hit with traditional publishing that I would never be able to even access as an indie published author.
Yeah. And I have a bias towards source books myself. I know their their slogan or logo is we publish authors, not books.
Yeah.
And I have found that to be true. I can count on the fact that when Sourcebook sends me a galley and I read across so many genres, it really doesn't matter what genre it is. I know I'm going to love it because they really, it just comes through. It comes through in your books and it comes through, I feel like, on every level, the amount of support they give their people.
Oh, the support is, incredible. It's just, there's nothing like it.
Absolutely. Oh, Margaret says, love source books. Found them via Susanna Kearsley. And now a devoted fan.
Yeah.
Yes.
Margaret, I do love that they're.
Go ahead.
I just love that publishers are giving indie authors the, respect that they deserve now. I feel like for a long time it was indie versus traditional publishing, or like indie in spite of traditional publishing. And I feel now like traditional authors are saying like, okay, like it is completely possible in the romance genre to hit great heights without the traditional publishing, which it's not as easy to do in a lot of other subgenres of books.
Yeah.
Or the genres of books in general. Romance has really like set the stage for indie publishers or indie authors to kind of make it big and make a mark on the publishing industry. And I love that. But I do love that they're able to uplift indie authors even more.
Mm-hmm.
And, they don't disrespect what you were able to do on your own, but now they're here to elevate you even higher.
Yeah.
Which is wonderful. So again, Emily's upcoming book, Twisted, releases on February 7th, 2023. So, and that is an Aladdin reimagining with, is the hero Jafar then? Right?
Julian Faraci and Yasmin Karam are the two characters. And there's not a tiger, but there is a snake.
Okay, we'll go for it. Is there a very annoying bird sidekick?
There is an annoying sidekick, but it is a human. But he might squawk. But he might squawk like a bird would.
I love it. One of my, I know we're supposed to be wrapping up, but one of my favorite parts was just reading Hook and just finding all these little like Easter eggs. Like, oh my God, like there is that character. There's that character. There's like a reference to that happening, like the TikTok and all this. And so it was like reading like a fun little, like, not a quiz, that's like a wrong word, but just, I don't know, a fun little like fantasy book where you just got to feel like you were a part of it every step of the way. Like your childhood was like flashing before you, but much darker. But thank you so much for joining us tonight and for bringing your trade secrets with us, or to us.
Absolutely. And I have links for everybody watching. I put links. Please go to bookshop.org, find a Mighty Blazes shop on there, and you can order and pre-order all of Emily's books. And thank you for supporting A Mighty Blaze. To make sure that you aren't missing any of our upcoming events, please do go to our website and sign up for our newsletter, and that way you'll know who's coming and when. Next month on Blaze Boudoir, we will be welcoming author Denise Williams. And if you missed part of this broadcast, please do go to our YouTube channel, subscribe, and this will be there for you to watch in its entirety. So thank you so much, everyone who joined us tonight. Thank you for your questions, your comments. Emily, this was fascinating. I could have listened to the two of you all night long.
You could have if you didn't cut us off.
I loved this whole discussion. And thanks again for joining us. And everybody have a wonderful evening.
Thank you so much.
Bye.